You're on your phone, in bed, thumb moving almost automatically. One headline feels important, so you open it. Then another, and another. 10 minutes later, nothing in your room has changed, but the world feels less stable than it did before you picked up the phone. That's the paradox. Doomscrolling looks like information, but it behaves like threat scanning. And this isn't just about mood. Negative feeds don't simply update what you know, they quietly reshape what you trust, what you expect from people, and what kind of world you believe you live in. Doomscrolling isn't liking bad news. It's a style of attention, repeatedly scanning for signals that confirm fragility, conflict, instability, collapse. It can happen through politics clips, crime stories, disaster footage, economic panic threads, health scares, layoff posts, any stream where emotional gravity pulls toward danger. The reason it feels so reasonable is simple. Humans are wired to detect threats faster than neutral information. Missing danger was historically costly, so your mind prioritizes possible threat over possible calm. Your nervous system doesn't wait for statistical balance, it reacts to salience. The feed didn't create that bias, but it industrialized it. Fast, personalized, infinite, socially reinforced. It scaled your survival instinct into a daily lifestyle. Doomscrolling rarely begins as, "I want to spiral." It begins as, "I should stay informed," as, "I don't want to be naive," as, "I need to understand what's happening." That's why it's sticky. It frames scrolling as responsibility and stopping as denial. You open an app just to check while waiting for a ride. First post, a disturbing incident. Second, public conflict. Third, a thread where people sound certain that society is collapsing. You tell yourself you're catching up, but notice your body. You're not reading calmly, you're scanning. Attention narrows, your jaw tightens slightly. You search for patterns, motives, hidden causes, who's to blame, what comes next. The goal subtly shifts from understanding to anticipating. Even after closing the app, that mode lingers, like a tab left open in your head. You walk into a room still slightly braced. The pull isn't weakness, it's a loop that flatters your intelligence while quietly draining your sense of safety. It rewards vigilance and calls it awareness. And the longer you stay in that mode, the more ordinary calm starts to feel suspicious. Here's the mechanism in simple terms. Threat scanning shapes interpretation, and interpretation updates worldview. When your inputs are repeatedly built around extremes and conflict, your mind begins to treat danger as common, trust as risky, stability as temporary. Not because those are always true, but because repetition shifts baseline expectations. Your brain learns from frequency, not fairness, and over time it adjusts your internal normal. Repetition doesn't argue with you, it conditions you. What once felt exceptional starts to feel typical. What once felt unlikely begins to feel inevitable. Over time, this reshapes trust. A steady diet of betrayal, corruption, scams, violence, collapse normalizes suspicion as realism. You don't think, "I'm anxious," you think, "I'm just seeing clearly." It reshapes meaning. When outrage and failure dominate your inputs, it becomes harder to sustain a story where effort matters and outcomes feel fair. Cynicism doesn't arrive as a conscious decision, it accumulates quietly through repetition. It reshapes time. The future feels shorter, less guaranteed. You become more reactive, more present-obsessed, more primed for disappointment. Doomscrolling can feel productive because you're collecting data, but you're also reinforcing an internal model. The world is unsafe, people are unreliable, and things are getting worse. Even distant events aren't stored as distant, they're stored as examples of how reality behaves. And here's the twist. Doomscrolling doesn't just show you threats, it teaches you what counts as one. Once trained, the scanner fires more easily. Ambiguity feels suspicious, silence feels loaded. Neutral events begin to require explanation. Your threshold for something's wrong lowers, while things are fine becomes harder to access. If this feels familiar, I'm curious. What category does your scrolling gravitate toward? Social conflict? Economic fear? Safety stories? Health scares? Generalized outrage? Drop one word in the comments.
Why now? Because the modern information environment is structurally optimized for threat. The attention economy doesn't reward proportion or calm reflection. It rewards intensity and duration. And threat keeps you longer than reassurance ever could. It generates unfinished questions. Who's responsible? What's the hidden cause? Could this happen to me? What does this mean for the future? The moment a question feels unresolved, your brain wants closure. But the feed rarely gives closure. It gives continuation. Add personalization and social proof, and the system becomes even more powerful. The algorithm learns what spikes your attention, your particular fears, values, anger triggers, moral sensitivities, and it serves you more of the same. And you don't just see the event, you see thousands of people interpreting it. Comments don't simply react, they frame reality. They tell you what's obvious, who to distrust, what's coming next, what kind of world this proves we live in. Over time, that becomes a quiet education, not just about isolated incidents, but about the nature of society itself. And unlike older media cycles, the stream doesn't end. There's no clear boundary where the day closes and your nervous system stands down. There's always another update, another angle, another warning. Imagine it's late. You've decided you're done. Then a notification appears. Breaking. It isn't directly relevant to your life, but the language is urgent. You open it. Someone writes, "This changes everything." Another says, "It's only going to get worse." You keep scrolling, not because you enjoy it, but because stopping feels like leaving mid-emergency. When you finally put the phone down, the quiet feels unnatural, almost irresponsible. That's the cultural shift. Attention begins to feel like duty, and calm begins to feel like ignorance. Over time, this trains a posture toward reality, constant monitoring, lowered baseline trust, the belief that safety comes from never looking away. And that posture feels intelligent. It feels mature. It feels like control. But the control is mostly illusion, because the feed doesn't end when you understand enough. It ends when you disengage. Your brain rarely receives the signal that it's safe to stop scanning. That's why the internal sense of fragility can outlast the headlines themselves. Doomscrolling doesn't primarily teach you facts. It teaches you stance. It repeatedly pairs attention with threat until threat begins to feel like the default setting of the world. You're not just learning that bad things happen. You're learning what kind of world you inhabit, what kind of people exist in it, and what outcomes you should expect. Through sheer volume, hundreds of small signals pointing in the same direction, your assumptions tilt. And once assumptions shift, interpretation follows. Conversations feel more loaded. Institutions feel less stable. Strangers feel less neutral. Even your long-term plans start to feel provisional, as if stability is temporary and trust is naive. Gradually, this shapes identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who knows what's really going on, more alert than others, harder to fool. And once that identity forms, questioning it starts to feel like weakness. And that identity can subtly change how you relate to people. You may interrupt faster, doubt quicker, extend less benefit of the doubt. Ordinary disagreements start to feel like proof of deeper decay. Cooperation feels fragile. Optimism feels unserious. None of this happens overnight. It happens through repetition. Nothing in your room changes, but your internal map of reality does. And you make decisions from that map every single day. That's why doomscrolling can become a form of worldview engineering. Not because someone is consciously manipulating you, but because your attention system is being trained in a specific direction, toward vigilance, suspicion, shortened horizons. This isn't about blaming anyone for scrolling. It's about recognizing a loop that feels rational, is culturally reinforced, and can slowly narrow the world into something harsher than it actually is. And once that narrowing becomes your baseline, it shapes how you show up in relationships, how much ambiguity you tolerate, how willing you are to extend trust, how much future you allow yourself to imagine. If you want more videos that map these modern psychological shifts without turning them into self-help lectures, you can subscribe. And I'm genuinely curious, when doomscrolling pulls you in, what does it promise you? Clarity, control, or certainty? One word in the comments is enough.